Hi everyone, and welcome to the Nation's Call podcast with Jonna and Alyssa. Here we talk about stories from the missions field, how our theology has been changed by being with the broken and various cultures, along with other missions reflections. We hope we can uplift and inspire you with our stories and musings. Thank you for listening.
Hello! Welcome back! Today we're talking about money.
Following the money.
Yes!
Say that in your gangster voice.
You gotta follow the money!
Follow the money. We're talking toxic missions, and
Yes.
we're talking dollars and cents.
This is the first episode of our new series on toxic missions.
Unofficially, it's kind of like our second, because if you want to count our wrong reasons,
Yes. I mean...
it is all what it is. Go ahead.
So, we've been reading a book called Helping Without Hurting in Short-Term Missions. And
I highly recommend.
I both highly recommend it, and I've been having like a nervous ongoing breakdown for the past month about it.
It's just a constant.
So, this all started before we read the book, Helping Without Hurting in Short-Term Missions. I started looking up how much money is spent on missions per year as a whole. Long-term missionaries, short-term missionaries, the whole machine, kit and caboodle, all of it. Every year, about 2 billion with a B. I'm sorry, you said kit and caboodle and I heard kitten and poodles. Good lord. Okay. Every year, about $2 billion is spent on missions. You put that into perspective for you, Jonna. That's a lot. 2 billion kittens and poodles. I'm kidding. So, put this into perspective.
It's like if Jeff Bezos actually wanted to spend money on something other than
God.
himself. Wow.
1 million seconds is 11 days, but 1 billion seconds is 32 years.
Ooh, wow.
That's days versus years. So, like, that's the scale. $2 billion per year. And a lot of that money goes to short-term missions.
Well, I mean, it doesn't really get to see the ministry at all.
No. So we've been kind of breaking down our last couple trips and trips we've been on, trips we've heard about, doing some thoughts.
So here's my thoughts. So I was on a short-term missions to Romania my first year, and my second year I went to short-term missions in Romania again with the same organization, but I stayed for like 2 or 3 more weeks afterwards, and Pastor Earl and a couple other individuals asked me the breakdown, like, how much did I pay to go with that organization? And that's when it started for me, was it didn't calculate, because
Money didn't add up.
that money doesn't add up.
Like, seriously, you should go into how much money disappeared and then backtrack from there.
Yeah, so at the least $630 disappeared.
Just poof.
From the $1,000. And yeah, I get, like, ministry organizations need to pay for themselves, and marketing, blah, 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 and grossness and nastiness, and blah, blah, stats and whatever. But also, I spent $1,000, and $630 of that disappeared. Did not see the field.
Does that count your plane tickets and transportation costs?
Nope. Does not count my plane tickets.
Like, once you got over there in Romania?
I'm sure it included, like, the gas when I was in Romania, but it did not include the airfare, which is usually the big chunk anyway. So, the breakdown was, it's $10 a night for food and stay in Dragneš, the village. And so I stayed for 7 days, so that's $70. And I know that they have anywhere from $150 to $300 for ministry costs. All right, let's say they were very generous and gave $300. So therefore, my trip was $370, and I don't know where the $630 went at all. And when I told Raul about it, he also was very shocked and surprised, and he also told me that he didn't see more than half of it.
So, I did some digging into missions organizations in general and how they spend their money. So because of the way nonprofits work, and I did not realize any of this until this year when we started sitting down with a lawyer to file all of our paperwork, and then more recently, I've been doing a ton of reading on tax laws. And basically, if you are a non-church missions nonprofit organization, you have to file what's called a 990 form, which is not, you don't have to pay taxes. You just file it as a sign of good faith. Hey, here's our financial breakdown. We spent this much money on trips. We spent this much money on advertising. Here are some of our business expenses like pens and pencils, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, if you are a church organization, missions, dealio, you don't have to file a 990 at all. Which means you don't have to tell anybody what you spend your money on.
Yeah.
And there are millions of dollars, I'm not going to name names, but there are millions of dollars going through missions organizations, and they have only the accountability of themselves.
Yeah. Well, you asked for the 990 from that organization I went with.
And I didn't get anything because they don't have one.
Yeah.
Because you can look up on the IRS website 990s from missions organizations, which I've done.
That's cool.
And they're really interesting to look at, and they're super helpful for smaller organizations like us. Because then I can see, this went here, here's how they filed it. We can file it similarly.
Mm-hmm. But they just have a pie graph.
They have a pie chart that's like, this much went to advertising, this much went to business cost, and this much went to like one other thing. It's like three
major things.
Three things. And they just have this huge chunk that's several $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And it just says business expenses on it.
Right, but what does that mean?
Whatever. I have no idea.
Yeah. So, when I was planning our trips, and I was offering to take people with us, I broke it down as in, like, we were going for 14 days, so that's $140. We had $100 each for each leader, so that our, like, expenses would be covered.
Because, for us specifically, we were in a situation where the leadership for one of our short-term missions teams,
Mm-hmm.
they were not covered financially, like, a week before we went on the trip. And their status of going on the trip at all was in question. Ugh. Which is not a good way to plan something.
No, it's not.
You have to write your own expenses into the trip cost if you are going to be a leader in a missions organization.
And I only did that because Raul told me explicitly that I had to.
Right.
Because I wasn't going to write that at all. And so we had that, so that it was 3 leaders at that time, because I think I was counting Nicholas was going to come with us, and it was going to be me and you. So that's $300. So that's $440. And then I had $100 for emergency, which is $540, and then a $25 t-shirt that I was going to make. So that's like $565. And, I made sure to add some padding and stuff. And then I had ministry costs. And then I, was going to give, $300 for ministry cost, something, so that we could give food and Bibles and whatever we needed. And so it came down to, $800 for 2 weeks in Romania, not including airfare.
Right.
But I knew that, I could tell you outright exactly what it was,
Right. We had all of the money very carefully planned out. Our emergency money, everything, your entire breakdown. And we were prepared to be incredibly open with it. And it was even on the flyers for that trip that we were going to do that ended up falling through.
Right. And it was transportation and everything was all covered. And this was for 2 weeks, not 1 week.
Right.
Let's make that.
It was 2 weeks of a missions trip. And it was
yeah, it was still less. So it made me really question. Because I'm like, okay, $800 is close to $1,000, so that's not really that different. But it is if it's double the time.
Right. So for a 1 week trip of 7 days to have it $1,000?
Yeah.
And that's just the 1 week cost, not transportation, not anything else.
Right.
And then the pastor doesn't see anything other than money to pay for the electrical bills and the gas bills and all that kind of stuff. where does the money go in short-term missions? Because it doesn't go to the pastor, and it doesn't go to the long-term missionaries.
Right. I don't know. This is something I really want us to be open about whenever we start hosting teams, is to be able to track down to the penny. Like, this is, or to the Bonnie, this is exactly where this is.
Right. And I want to write into our costs money that funds ongoing organization, like money that funds the ongoing stuff of the long-term people who are there. Like,
right.
It's such a big job to plan a trip, just to orchestrate all the stuff, because the mission, like the missionaries who are there long term and the pastors who are overseas long term, they plan the itinerary.
Right.
And like, you know, about all the stuff that goes on with an itinerary because you've been there for 4 years.
Right.
So you should explain like an itinerary in Romania, because I've never had one.
Right. So itinerary happens when there is probably more than 4 people. And so since I was part of 2 different teams, that was 10 or 11 people, we got an exact itinerary. They plan like basically every hour of the day. They're like, you wake up and you have like an hour of Bible time or whatever, and you have breakfast with Anna at like 8.
And they plan what you're going to eat for all your meals too.
Yes, they plan everything that you're going to eat. They make sure they have everything in stock. I've been sent on penny runs, just, we need a loaf of bread.
Penny market runs.
Yeah. And like, you know, so they plan everything. They have everything laid out. Anna like works hard on cooking everything. And both of us have worked beside her, making sure everything's cooked and helping her and making sure everything's clean. My first year, I was the only person that did dishes with her. Nobody else on my team would do dishes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait for a second. Go into why, like, what was going on? Why do you think no one else helped with dishes? Like, what were some of the attitudes? Like, just set the scene a little bit.
I don't know. I mean, I was raised like, all right, you're done eating, you go clean the dishes, or like, you know, this person cooked, so they deserve rest. So like, I'm very much the mindset of, you cooked, you don't clean, somebody else cleans. And so knowing that Anna cooked and then seeing her that she was cleaning, I got up and decided to help her, which I think is why Anna likes me so much. But the rest of my team were busy talking to each other. And
that hurts me because I have such a strong conviction about, if you're on a missions trip, you are there to serve other people, not yourself.
Yeah. And if you guys are listening to this, I'm not bashing you guys. I love you guys. But it's just something I observed. And nobody probably noticed it, but I noticed it. And so she just works so hard. And I could see her working so hard. And they have everything planned to the hour. Like, you get a break here, and you get free time here, and this day you get to have fun in Bucharest and enjoy whatever you want, and like, you plan that, and you're staying the night at this hostel, and blah blah. Like, they have everything planned, versus our trips have always been like, oh yeah,
guess we're doing laundry today.
You could do whatever you want forever!
Basically.
But also like, oh, we're also going to do this maybe, and if you wanted to hang out with this, we can do this, and we're going to go see this people, and, you know.
The long-term missionary life is different.
Yes.
Than the short-term trip life. How long do you think it takes to set up an itinerary? Because you've done it for us several times now, and I remember it taking at least a week.
Yeah, it takes forever. Especially depending on how organized you are.
Because you got a Skype call with your overseas contacts.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not there. And you got to plan all of that. And then there's reworking of the schedule like 18 bajillion times because this driver can't drive you to Serbia that day. Or you got to like move your trip really, really fast to go meet your contact in Russia. You know, stuff like that. It keeps changing. It's this like
ever-evolving
machine
project, and it's never done until like the week before, and then you're like, it's done!
And then it's not done.
And then it's over! But yeah, it takes a really long time to spend that planning everything. I know when I was planning trips, I had like at least 4 different Skype calls with Raul, and then it was like, blah, blah, and then he's like, alright, I'll set Christina on it, and then Christina gets on it, and then reworking of the schedule forever until we get there, and then, yeah.
Yeah, it's just... And if you're scheduling, you can't work a job during those hours.
No.
So if you don't get paid to schedule or you don't get compensated for scheduling, then what does that mean for you? I guess you just, don't get to eat?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, maybe that's also where the money is coming from. I just wish it was more, clarified of this is exactly where it's going.
Receipts.
Yes. I want to know where it's going. I'm just curious. I'm not upset.
Right.
Because people gotta eat, but I also...
Right, that's the thing. I'm advocating that people should be compensated.
Yes.
More than I'm advocating that people should just not eat.
Right. And so I think that's really interesting. And then reading the book Helping Without Hurting also has talked a bit about how some people need money more than they need people to come help. And so I'm pretty blessed that all of our contacts need people because I like being there and working in person. And that's just me. I know some people that would just rather give, and I would rather give by my time and being there and experiencing everything, while other people would rather give money, and both are very, very important.
I would say that they're about the same necessity level in missions. People that are willing to go and people that are willing to stay and fund stuff. I think it's the same.
I agree.
And there are some people that would argue me, that would fight me on that.
I'll fight them back.
Because I've read a lot of articles that say, oh, if you're not willing to go on a missions trip, then how can you even be a good Christian? And I'm like, well,
they're liars.
First of all, what about all the people who are homebound for
good reason?
Various reasons. For example, disabled people, elderly people, people that work a job that they cannot leave for, but they could potentially give money to.
People with families that feel like they can't move.
Young children.
Yeah. And there has been families that go on mission trips, but that's a very specific season that is only pertained to them.
Yeah, it's
not
it's
for
very
everybody.
Difficult, and
it is very difficult. So
I think conversation.
I really do think it's just as important, if not sometimes more important, to give money.
It's definitely not talked about.
It's not, and it should be. And I know that every time I've talked about give to us, please, because we're going, I've always been I have always felt like it's more important, or it's just as important, and I've always felt to give, and I've always felt, in the Bible it says you'll get a reward in heaven, blah blah, that kind of stuff, and I've always felt that my reward for going on the missions field, that's the same reward as somebody that gave me $5, because without that $5, I couldn't get there. I've always felt like it was just as important, and the reward wasn't really going to be any different because they had a piece of it.
Right.
Without them, I can't go.
Right.
And some places, they would rather see money than people. And so whenever I get to that point, that's when I'll have to learn how to give more of my money than less of me.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Let's talk for a second about how some pastors overseas, according to the book Helping Without Hurting, have found that short-term missions are more of something they have to put up with in order to get long-term funding.
Well, it specifically reminds me of one of our contacts in Athens, if you remember.
Vaguely.
So, we had a contact in Athens, and we met with the short-term missions coordinator. And when we asked about coming, he wasn't nice.
He was very burned out.
He was extremely burnt out. And he's like, well, why would you come when that's time away from my family, And so I think that reminds me of okay, well, they might just need funding. But then meeting the founder of the organization, he was very much yes, we need people. So it kind of gave me a little bit of whiplash because I was which one is it? I want to come and help.
In that specific situation, I really felt like what they needed was for someone to take initiative and start planning the itinerary of their team themselves and just run it by the person who was burned out and have them be no, don't do this instead, and then just sign off on it.
Yeah.
Because it was the planning the immense weight that was being put on him to plan entire trips that I think was too much.
Or even have, like, a template of, this is what you do when you have, like, a 10-person team, and have, like, this template that you just pass around.
He needed help.
He needed assistance so bad. And then I also think, because he mentioned orientation, I think if they had a video orientation that the leaders made sure and had accountability of making their team watch it before they got there, that would be perfect.
Some instances, I think that we almost need short-term teams who can go and set up something like videography, that kind of stuff, like an organizational team that helps make a way for more teams to come in after them.
Yeah.
Like, that's my passion. Is like, I want short-term teams that can go and, like, help film and do all this stuff that's like, okay, we need this, and then do it, and then leave it for that organization to keep using that information.
Right. Like, here's some promo videos for you to use.
Yes.
Here's like an orientation video so you don't have to repeat yourself. I've listened to the orientation in Romania like 4 or 5 times.
It could be taped.
And the last time they're like, you don't have to listen to this because you've been here so often. And I'm like, yeah, I'll listen to it anyway. It's fine. And it could be and it should be taped. I think it should be taped. I think it would be better for everybody to have an orientation about the country you're going to before you get on a plane.
Yeah, honestly.
Because
there's so much stuff that could be streamlined and take the burden off of these people.
And that's like one more, like, another 4 hours that you could be on the field instead of being inside listening to orientation. And also it helps you to not accidentally cuss in your language on the bus trying to get to the church.
Whoops.
Y'all don't know by now. Foot is not a good word in Romanian, and I've absolutely done that on accident. I tried to say singular feet, and I said singular foot, and a woman gasped really loud. I thought she was going to have a heart attack.
Once, this is a side story, a little bonus Easter egg. Once we were in a church service,
oh dear God,
and there was an American man who was invited to speak. He was not prepared.
No.
The poor man. They were like, you! And he was
You're
like,
not from around here?
Me? They're like, you're speaking. And he's like, right now?
I am?
And they're like, yeah. And so he preached about going to the foot of the cross.
In Romania.
Oh, my Lord.
When foot is the F word.
He dropped the F-bomb, like, in a Romanian church.
Like 6 times?
Like 6 or 7 times. And then later we told him, like, do you know what that means? And he was like, no. And we told him, and he was like, did I say it? And I was like, your message was titled, At the Foot of the Cross. And he's like, oh my Lord. And we were like, oh, honey.
And we're like, it's okay, I don't think they noticed.
They noticed.
Like, it's fine. But it's like things like that. I'm like, you just need a video of orientation and make sure people watch it and then just do that before you land.
You can know better faster.
Yes. Yes, it's possible.
And Raul has to do orientation so many times.
Oh, he passes it on to literally anyone else. I think
literally anyone else. He could do it one time and then, like, never again and be doing so much other stuff.
Yeah, he passes it on to everybody else. I'm pretty sure that if we were there this past summer and there was a team, he would have told me to do it.
Probably.
Be like, this is E2E. This is give him a rod, not a fish. This is Sparrow Designs. Don't say foot. Don't do that. Don't pet the dogs. Don't sit on the ground. Don't put your feet in the chair.
She says with her feet in the chair.
I know.
Now I'm going to read a story from the Helping Without Hurting book that we've been referencing this entire time. So, the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's part of walking in faithful obedience to our Lord, but sometimes we develop blind spots in our application of the golden rule. Certain areas of our vision become obscured by tradition, by incomplete information, or even by good intentions. Imagine for a moment that your phone rings. It's a friend of a friend calling from Thailand. After a few minutes of small talk, the caller explains that his church in Thailand would like to send you 25 people, about half of them under the age of 18, to your church for 2 weeks next summer. They understand that you are ministering in the low-income apartment complexes around your church, and they want to come help. The only time they can come is the first 2 weeks of July, the peak of your church's ministry season. But don't worry, we are there to help. We've prepped a series of skits, crafts, and lessons to present in VBS classes. We will just hold them in the apartment complex's courtyard, the voice reassures you. We are bringing gifts for the children to make sure they will attend the VBS, and one of our team members is an electrician who can fix anything in your buildings while we are there. A few details must be worked out. The group will have to be picked up from the nearest major airport, a 2-hour trip, and they will need places to stay, and they'll expect to be fed 3 meals a day throughout their visit. Nothing too out of what they're comfortable with. What is a casserole exactly? Oh, and one other thing. Most of them do not speak English well, if at all. Please arrange translators to accompany them during their stay. Meanwhile, your church members have spent the past 3 years gradually developing relationships with the apartment residents, building their trust. The apartment residents are mostly low-income families, and it has taken time for them to feel comfortable with your church's presence in the neighborhood. While you consider the pros and cons of this offer, the voice continues, we are just so excited about this opportunity to sacrifice for the sake of the gospel. Our church members are ready and willing to raise $40,000 to come. We are that invested in supporting your work, and depending on how things go, we might explore other opportunities to work together. You know what that last phrase really means. If we like what we see, we will be willing to give your church ongoing financial support. Your church could certainly use the money to purchase new AV equipment and refurbish its nursery, but at what cost? Housing, feeding, and supervising 25 people with limited English skills? And what about the relationships at the apartment complex? How will the residents respond to a group of Thais passing out candy and leading VBS sessions? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It sounds so simple until it isn't. This is like the backwards version of what happens many, many times in short-term teams. And I think I just sit with that pretty much every day.
I mean, it definitely resonates a lot of, Romania, because it is a 2-hour ride to the airport. And I've definitely requested Alex to drive me because I've been very uncomfortable with the train. Not because I think the train is sketch or anything. It's mainly, you have to know the language, and I really suck at intercoms, especially traveling by myself. I know I suck at intercoms. I always ask the person next to me what they said on the intercom, because I don't get it.
It's hard enough navigating train intercoms in English.
Right. I really suck at it in English.
In a language that you're not so fluent in is just
the worst.
Yeah.
I've literally requested Alex because I'm I don't think I can. I do not think I can get off at the right stop.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing that takes not just 2, but 4 hours out of his day.
It is a road trip.
And it's a road trip. So I do kind of feel guilty about that, but I'm also kind of I feel like that was safest for me,
mm-hmm.
And I do want to get to the point where I'm familiar enough. I know you can understand intercoms.
I can understand intercoms, but I've not tried Romanian intercoms.
Right. So it's just kind of one of those things where, 4 hours out of the day, and then they do have mission houses that we stay in, so they don't really have to worry about housing because they're very well prepared for teams. And no, I don't speak Romanian well enough for me to be gone without a translator, but I do try, and
so we do try to lighten the load.
Yeah.
That we know it causes to be American and do stuff in a culture and language that we're not comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and that's why I get really excited about being a translator, is because I'm that's one more job I can do. I can translate for you. I've invited a lot of people to come visit us, and I'm very excited to have our home open to people that want to come experience Romania and our family and friends. But I'm also when you come, I want to be your translator. Like, I need to know the language so I'm not inconveniencing somebody else.
Right.
You know? And I'm very excited about that's one less thing to inconvenience someone with.
Right.
And they don't treat it as an inconvenience, so that's not what I'm saying. But it's just another load off.
It makes me feel like if I carry my own burdens,
right,
it's like our responsibility as people who want to be there long term to do the work of trying to carry our own weight.
Right.
Especially in a daily situation. Like, we do all of our shopping.
We make all of
by
our
ourselves.
Food. Yeah, we make all of our food.
And rarely ever do I have to ask what something means because Google exists.
Google Translates really is awesome.
And there is Wi-Fi in a lot of, like,
I mean, you can
at the church, at the mission house. You can even,
you can download the language that you're translating to if you know what it is, which is Romanian.
Some of these things just associated with the burden of short-term trips, if they were put in orientation or in, before you go material.
Right. I think that would help.
It would really lighten the load on missions as a whole.
Like, I think I'm more prepared for organizing like orientation and like, here's some different tips and tricks than I am with social media marketing. And I've studied social media marketing for like just as long. And I still think I suck at it.
I think for us, we do try to kind of separate missions and travel. Mm-hmm. But there are some places where you really need to have it in your brain. You are traveling, and it is your responsibility to learn about travel as
right.
its own experience.
Yeah.
And be ready for, like, pack pants and a skirt, because if the culture requires it, then you need to have it.
Yes.
That's just something you need to take care of yourself.
Right.
Because all of these things, all of these burdens equate financially on some level to the church. So, like, if you're not prepared, okay, the airport's this far away, and if I'm going to ask this person to pick me up, then I'm going to pay for my own gas money the same way I would pay for a train ticket.
Yeah.
That's what we do.
Right.
But some people, that is not so clear to, and I want that to be
right
more at the forefront of some conversations about missions. Just because it's like, it's hard, but it needs to be said.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and some trips, it's difficult to separate travel and missions for, like Athens specifically. Whenever I was planning our trip, like a trip for a team to come with us to Athens, there was no way that I was going to cut out the Parthenon. Like, I'm an artist. I was studying the Parthenon when we went. So I was like, yeah, we will go to the Parthenon and I will be your personal tour guide and it will be great. Because you also need days off and to experience the place that you're at.
Right. Especially if all you're giving to the organization you're going to help is physical labor, then it also is beholden to you to schedule in enough off time so that you can be helpful at all.
Yes.
Which is why I don't think short-term teams of 1 week works financially.
No.
Or logistically.
I mean, for me, when I went on the first trip was a 1 week trip, and I couldn't stare at an airplane for the next 6 months because I was so exhausted because there's 3 connecting flights on the way there and then 3 more on the way back, and only in a week's worth of time there was 6 flights, and I'm not a flight attendant, so that's exhausting. By the time I get home, I need another week just to recoup. But whenever I keep my longer trips, I don't need that long. I just need a recoup because of the jet lag.
Right.
Not because I'm exhausted from 6 flights in 7 days.
Right. I don't think that we should drive people to burnout.
No.
And that also goes into relationships, but right. I think that's a different episode.
Yes, it is. And that reminds me of our Dominican Republic trip. Like, whenever we got there, we had a day off. And then before we left, we also had another day off. And it felt very, like, almost vacation-y to me. But they explained it. They're like, well, the heat here is different. And if you don't have this day off to, like, adjust to the country and then have another day off at the end of it, you will be exhausted and dehydrated and XYZ.
Yeah, and that's another amount of money.
Yes.
If you have to go to the hospital,
Yeah.
and if you're not prepared to foot that bill,
Right.
then...
I mean, that's why you have to have travel insurance, you know? I know that there's at least 2 or 3 different times where Americans got bit by dogs in Romania. And I remember Anna being like, why are they getting bit by dogs? I don't understand. What's happening? And I'm like, well, are they petting them? And she's like, they wouldn't. Would they? Are they really petting the dogs? Probably.
Like,
we're Americans.
See puppy, pet puppy.
Yeah.
Even if it's a full-grown wolf.
I know. I'm like, they see the dog. They don't see wolf. They say, oh, puppy. It's a wolf.
Yeah.
So, and that... I know from, like, overhearing the stress of it, Raul was extremely stressed of the way the organization was going to look at them. Because, like, their person got hurt.
Bit.
Their person got hurt on their...
Oh, man, I didn't even think about that. Somebody gets bit by a dog because the orientation lacked it, because culturally they didn't know Americans were going to pet dogs, and now all of a sudden they got to worry about whether or not their long-term, ongoing financial support
And partnership
and physical support by people coming is all jeopardized.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I remember Raul kind of, like, spazzing a little bit, and he doesn't spaz.
That's crazy. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. So, and that's why the conversation with Anna got brought up, because she knew she could trust me, because I wasn't in the organization, and I was a third party.
Right.
Because she was freaking out a little bit about it.
So, personal error on people not learning how to travel correctly,
Yeah.
can jeopardize the financial income for an entire organization.
Yeah. Don't pet the animals. Just don't. Like,
Could. I mean, it could.
yeah, it
But
could.
consider something else. Like, if something else went wrong and it was technically, quote unquote,
Their
the
fault.
fault of
The person being dumb.
Yeah, or like it wasn't in the, you know,
Right.
it wasn't in the
So-
talk that we had.
Yeah. So I told Anna to put in the orientation, don't pet the dogs. Because I feel like that would have helped a little bit. At least a little bit. Can't help if you get rushed by dogs, but you can help it if you're trying not to pet them.
That's rough.
In closing thoughts, giving is just as important as going.
Yes. Ask your organization that you're going with for a breakdown of where the money goes for your trip.
You should.
Do it. It's not illegal. You can ask these things.
Right.
And if you don't like what you see, you can question it. You really can. Missions is not above question. In
Right.
fact, this whole series is basically just us being like, this
Question.
is done badly. How can we do this not badly?
Right? And if you think we're doing something sketch,
Email
to
us.
Yeah, email us, talk to us, ask us. We'll explain. We're very open. And if we explain it and you still don't like it and you still want to correct us, cool. We are here for growth.
Yeah, that's what it's about, honestly. I try not to be too cynical about missions and money, but sometimes it's really hard, and it's something that I just
Sometimes
need
it
to
is.
pray about, I guess.
Sometimes it is really hard. And I do know that, like, one of the first expenses that I really want to do, if I could ever find it, is hire a freaking social media marketer. Tell me what I'm doing. And then, like, okay, you're good.
Right. All right, Jonna, do you have a blessing for missions and money?
Yes. Also, try not to be a burden. Just
Financially or just
everything in
physically
general.
and spiritually. I don't know.
Yes. Yes. Okay. God, thank you so much for our desire to grow and be better. God, thank you for showing us constant ways of how we can improve. And I ask you that you keep showing us those different directions, that we can be honorable and be a blessing, that you show us exactly how we can not be a burden and give us strategic motives and moves so that we can assist and help without hurting.
And bring clarity to the financial aspect of missions organizations.
Yes. Yeah, that too. Yes. Thank you so much. And that you go and be blessed. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Bye, guys!
Bye.
The Nation's Call is a 501c3 missions organization supported by wonderful people like you. If you would like to partner with us, you can do so by going to Patreon at patreon.com/thenationscall and by following us on Instagram and Facebook, where you can also ask us questions we might address here. Thanks for listening to the Nation's Call podcast.